Alright guys, so this is just a supplementary video to our sighting and measuring um, module, and this will just go in along with the four other ones that I've already done with the angles and all that kind of stuff. But when you, this is just to reiterate how to start using this. So first things first, choose your object. Then number two, have your pencil. And to begin with, you need to lock your arm. Do not have it at an angle. You need to lock it out so that it provides a stationary, fixed point where you can now take your thumb and from the tip of the pencil, measure the base, or you can say the width of the bottle. Notice how my arm is straight, and from the tip of my pencil, I am measuring the width of this bottle. And while I'm holding my thumb there, I will now measure the height. So there's 1, 2, it's about 2.5, 2 3/4. And so with that idea, so whatever size you decide to make this object, this is the width of your object. You can actually measure that, but the height of it has to be 2. So if we, visually speaking, if that's the width. You can use a ruler to get it vertical to help you with the measuring. 2, and always you can go back and measure twice. So if you take, make sure you go all the way to the bottom of the ellipse. So it's almost 3 from the bottom of the ellipse. See, I'm making my ellipse already here because that's where I measured, was from the bottom here. It's into that, and this is where you can determine visually, is it 3? Is it 2 3/4? Is it somewhere in between? That's where we can make some judgments. So you see I'm measuring there, and my lines aren't exactly straight, but see how I've got a measurement for the width of it, and I've made some marks near the top. So I've gone all the way to 3 because my hand's kind of shaking. But from that point, we can now measure by taking, once again, I think our reference measurement is the width. So if we go and count again, it's about 2.5, 2 3/4. It could change, but 2 3/4, kind of 2.5, 2 3/4, where the top of the actual ellipse of the bottle hits. So it is very, and then remember, this is where the top of the bottle hits, not the shoulder, the top of the bottle. So we're just measuring the bottle. We haven't gone into the cap yet. So this is where, after you make your line, your horizontal across, indicate the ellipse. And we can measure for this, we can measure the ellipse. But just quickly, you can do a quick gestural drawing of the ellipse here. Go down, make sure you curve. You can even do a gestural ellipse at the bottom here, as long as these are similar. And now we can measure the cap. So, once again, the reference measurement would be the width of the bottle. By using the width, I've now brought my pencil to the edge of the cap. Now, if you look at the tip of your pencil, how much further is the tip of the pencil? It's just over half, so it's not exactly half, but pretty close. So if you think about it, if you take half, and even a little bit more, because it was a little bit more. If you think about it, if you take half, the measurement of a little bit more than half of the width here, a little bit more than half, that is, and this is where a vertical line could be really helpful, because it is a vertical object. Just for spacing purposes. So now you can fit this cap now be aware of the ellipse at the top. Now that's where you gotta be aware of the curve there, but the very top of that cap should be the top of our the very top of the cap is what we measured at the beginning. Go in and put in the rest of our cap, and we can even measure how far up this outer edge of the cap rests. We can even measure how far in the cap goes from the ellipse. So it's not just measuring the large, we've been using the width as our reference point, but now when we're starting to draw that cap, we can even measure with our pencil. If we find the width again, we find the width. How much smaller is that measurement from the cap to the outer edge of the ellipse? So within the width of the bottle itself, how wide is that? I'd say it's a quarter of the way in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that looks pretty good, because a quarter of the way in looks like that's where the base of that cap sits. So in terms of the height of the cap, similar thing. You can take the width. If you do a vertical measurement, it is just about half as well. And just keep in mind, this ellipse, there's much more, you can see much more of the front of the ellipse than the back. So we're going to really make sure we give, because of the foreshortening, see how much more of the front of the ellipse than I've drawn of the back. And that's, once again, you can take very small measurements. By using the width of the bottle, you can measure vertically about a third. This measurement here So always remember, when you're doing smaller measurements, you can use your thumb, find smaller measurements, and compare it to the width of the bottle. So if I'm looking for the front of the ellipse, just found it there, and now I'm comparing it to the width of the bottle. How far in does that go? It's about a third. And that's when you can visually look and see, is this about a third? Is this measurement this here? Is this a third? Yeah, it's pretty close. So then once you start laying in these measurements, that's when you can start to instinctively build the form around these measurements. So our cap has a little bit more of a ellipse around there. If you want, you can put in a little bit of, just because it's black, you can put in a little bit of shading. But that is essentially what we're doing. And you could even, if you want to find what is the angle from the bottom left point of the bottle up to the top right to see if it matches up, you can actually just take your pencil and find that angle. And is it a similar kind of angle? So it's pretty steep. And on my paper, this angle here is pretty steep as well. It's pretty close. These angles, this is after you've done some measuring. You can look for the angles from these outermost points as references to your object. So remember, you can always find measurements by using your thumb and the tip of your pencil and always compare it to one of your basic measurements. I'm using the width of the bottle as my measurement. So I can even find the top of the cap, or the cap itself. How wide is that? Compare it to the base. It's about halfway. So always, when you're measuring, when you're trying to find different spatial arrangements, always compare it to one of your main reference measurements. And mine was always the width of the bottle, the base of the bottle, the width of the bottle. So I've been comparing everything at the top to the width of the bottle. Now, something else, by using verticals, at what point in the base of the object does the outside edge of the cap? So I'm looking at this vertical here. So at what point does the outside edge of the black cap, if you were to extend that vertical all the way down through the object, where does that hit the base? And it hits right at about a third there, about between a third and a quarter. So if we were to make a vertical from where we've made our outside edge of the cap, it tends to hit the base right in that 1/3 to 1/4 point. Now, if where you've made the outer edge of your cap does not fall pretty closely to that, that means either your bottle is too wide or your cap is off. So that's another way when sighting and measuring. Not only are you measuring with the tip of your pencil and your thumb, but you're also comparing where these edges hit within the object itself. These angles. So always start with the sighting and measuring. The width of the bottle has really helped me find the total height of the bottle. And from within that width, I was able to measure, well, how wide does the cap compare to the width of the whole bottle? So you're always comparing the parts to each other. I found that the width of this bottle was the best to use to find some of these smaller measurements. So it's like, how far in does the cap fall in that ellipse? You can measure that, compare it to the width. It's about a quarter to a third, and it fits right in there. So that's the beginning. That's initially how we sight and measure. You're always finding measurements with a fully straightened arm, elbow locked, and using your thumb and the tip of your pencil to find at least a beginning measurement and comparing that and using that measurement to build the object.